Welcome back, Rangers, to another episode of My Name is Bigfoot, and today we're talking about the Magnificent Seven. That's beers that are over 7% ABV, and today we are talking with...
Peter.
Peter, what is the name of your brewery?
I'm with Populuxe Brewing, as you can see here.
This is a Peppercorn Saison?
True.
Now, what is the percentage on this?
7.4.
What is the traditional Saison? Is it like a Hefeweizen, or...?
It's traditional Saison's kind of a misnomer. Saisons were sort of lighter, Pilsner-based, more refreshing beers that were brewed typically in the spring to get ready for the season, Saison.
Okay.
So they'd be consumed by, folks working out in the fields, things like that. So generally, historically, they weren't this big. But the description of Saison has really just blown wide open in the past few years, and it kind of has become a catch-all for any sort of adjunct heavy Belgian inspired beer that doesn't fit in any of the other Belgian categories.
That's crazy. What is the difference between a Peppercorn Saison and a standard Saison? I mean, what does it take to make a Saison in the first place?
So Saisons generally are really dry beers. So if you want to talk about beers that have a certain percentage of alcohol, there's two ways to get there. You can start with a lot of sugar up front and ferment all that sugar to get you your high alcohol, or you can start with a lesser amount of sugar but ferment it really dry. So you're still converting all that sugar into alcohol, but with Saisons you're doing it the second way. You're making a very dry beer.
Okay.
And so you start with the sort of medium, pale ale, original gravity, but you ferment it in such a way and with highly attenuative yeast that you end up with a very dry beer. And what that gives you is a beer that is high in alcohol, but drinks a lot easier than it would. It's not thick or heavy on the tongue the way a bourbon barrel-aged thing might be. Russian Imperial Stouts, you can only have really one or two, and then it's nap time.
And the taste buds are nuked and everything.
Right. And so this is a lot more. It's still a big beer, but it's dry enough that it's not heavy on the tongue. It's not tiring to drink. And the reason why it's a Peppercorn Saison is that I add. Originally, this beer has gone through several iterations, but originally it was 100% pink peppercorns.
Okay.
And so I would add these pink peppercorns to the end of the boil, just to impart that peppercorn flavor. It helps complement the yeast that I use. It's a more fruity yeast, and so those pink peppercorns aren't actually pepper; they're fruit.
Okay.
And it's like a small dried fruit. A lot of people confuse them with the regular black peppercorns.
That's exactly what I was asking. It's like, it doesn't taste like pepper at all, but...
Yeah, and so over time, I've had to add white peppercorn to the mix, because when people see Peppercorn Saison, they want to taste some pepper in it. And if all they taste is pink peppercorns, they're like, oh, it doesn't taste like pepper. So just understanding people's expectations for the beer and taking pity on my bartenders so they don't have to explain it all the time. Maybe
they have it in quotations. Pink peppercorn isn't a fruit, it's not an actual pepper.
You're right. Well, you're right.
What is it like being a craft brewer in Ballard?
It's great. We've got about 10 breweries within 1 square mile of this one, so it's a real dense area. So we've got a lot of breweries around, but I've known all these owners and brewers for years and years, and it's great to be part of this tight-knit community.
In a few moments, we're going to go ahead and walk through your brewery, and we're going to go through the steps on how to make this Peppercorn Saison.
Cool. Great. So right now we're up here on our 7-barrel brew house, and it's a combi tank system. So I've got the boil kettle here to my right, and then to my left, right behind you, that's our mash tun and hot liquor tank. And so this is where all of our large batch brews happen, and it's a direct fired 7-barrel kettle.
So we're at the beginning stages of making your Peppercorn Saison. What happens here?
So with this equipment, we're able to take our crushed grains, which is what we call our grist. And so we take our grist, we soak it in hot water, and we're able to extract the sugars from the grist, and that happens here in the mash tun.
Now, what exactly is grist?
Grist is, for this beer, it's going to be our Pilsner malts, our flaked wheat, a little bit of rye. So it's all of the barley and grains that we are soaking in the water in order to produce the sweet wort.
Now, how long do you soak it in the water before you go to the next stage?
That's about an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, to make a saison in a batch like this, how long does it take? A week, a month?
So the actual brew day process doesn't take very long. It takes about 6 to 8 hours.
Okay.
Depending on the beer. And then after it goes into the fermenter and starts to ferment, we let the yeast turn the sugar into alcohol. That takes more about a week, maybe 2 weeks.
Okay. So is it about 2 weeks to go from grains to bottle, or?
Yeah, grain glass in about 2 weeks. It really depends on the beer, but with this saison, very aggressive yeast, so it doesn't take that long. I'd say 2 weeks is just about right.
All right, cool. What stage are we at for this?
So if you're thinking about the brew house that we were just standing on, when we're making our peppercorn saison, right after we put the peppercorns in and we've stopped boiling, we're going to run all that liquid. It's about 300 gallons. We're going to run that liquid through a plate chiller, get it down to about 70 degrees, and then it goes into our fermenter here. So once it gets into the fermenter, that's when we're adding our yeast and letting it ferment for about 10 to 12 days.
Now, do you use a special type of yeast, or?
I do. We use actually it's a proprietary strain.
Okay.
I
understand your house secrets.
Yeah. Well, it's not house secrets. It's more like I wouldn't know what to call it, right? Okay. So if you wanted to replicate this, I don't use the French Saison yeast. I don't use the commercially available yeasts. Okay. We just something that we roll over in-house. Okay. That's really robust. We do make a lot of Saisons, a lot of Belgian styles, and that's the yeast that we use.
Okay, cool. Now, so after it goes through here, what is this process? This is, you said 2 weeks? Is this breaking it down to sugars, right?
Essentially what's happening here in the fermenter is that after we get the sugary wort into the fermenter and it's ready to ferment, we add the yeast, and what happens is the yeast go through and consume all those sugars and essentially piss out alcohol and fart out the CO2.
I love that. I've never heard that used before as a description, but it makes my beer tastier. I'm telling you, it's great. So then after the 2 weeks for this, then what is the next step?
So then we cold crash the beer.
Is
that
over here? Or?
No, it all stays right here in the tank.
Okay.
And so these are unitanks, and that's how I use them. And the unitank just means that everything happens in the same tank.
Okay.
So what happens is I use my glycol system here to lower the temperature of the beer down to about 34, maybe 33 degrees.
Okay.
And then pull all the yeast will settle out of suspension. I'll pull the yeast off the bottom, and then we carbonate it and keg it right off the tank.
Yeah. Now, are they pony kegs, or are you using big-ass kegs?
We do half barrels and sixtils here.
How did you go from being a home brewer to deciding that you wanted to open up a business?
Essentially I outgrew my garage. Okay. And so, it was always the dream to open up a brewery. Dreams versus reality, but basically what happened was that a good opportunity arose here at this location, and I just lived 2 blocks away.
Oh, see, that's cool.
So I was like, I could walk to the brewery. That would be kind of neat. It's a nice location, and it's a great community. We love Ballard, so we were looking everywhere, and there was just no commercial space available. But just through sheer luck, this space became available, and we decided, why not pursue the dream? We should go for it.
Nice. What is the strongest beer you've ever made?
So the strongest beer I ever made was actually a braggot, and a braggot is part mead, part beer.
Okay, I like honey mead and stuff like that.
Sure, yeah. So it's like a hybrid, and that beer came in at about 14% alcohol. And it was quite strong and took a very long time to make. Tasted delicious. Okay. But not really commercially viable.
What separates a braggot from normal meads?
So the beer world has so many different classifications: pale ales, IPAs, stouts, porters. The mead world is exactly the same, right? So you've got braggots and you've got melomels, which are sort of spiced meads, all different kinds. And so basically a braggot, what separates it from a beer or a mead is that it uses both honey and sugars from grain. So it's a hybrid beer and mead. And so that the yeast, when they're consuming all the sugars, they have both the regular grain sugars that you would get in a beer to eat, and then they also have the honey available to eat. And so that's how you can get really high alcohol beers.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Now, you also make an imperial stout too, right? And that's like 9% or something?
Yeah, we make an imperial stout. We also do an old ale, which is like a barley wine. It's an English style barley wine. Okay. So we definitely make big beers here.
Well, the next time you have those in season, give Bigfoot a call.
Absolutely.
And I'd love to interview you about the process on that. And if you other brewers out there, if you have beers that are over 7%, let your boy Bigfoot know, and I'll come and knock it. Well, again, man, thank you so much. It's been an honor. Yeah. I appreciate it.
It was fun.
Thank you.